Welcome to Football Today team profiles and previews. And we are looking at the Jacksonville Jags. They came in our power rankings at 17th, which I think is perfect. They went 9-8 last year. Offensively, they were 14th in scoring, 19th in EPA. Defensively, 17th in scoring, 13th in EPA per play. Doug Peterson's third year as their head coach after being fired by the Eagles. Press Taylor, third year with them. And defensive coordinator, which I think this is a nice move. They brought in Ryan Nielsen. His first season was the Falcons DC last year, and was the Saints co-DC before that. They were 8-3 last year and finished 9-8 on a 1-5 stretch, where the only win was a 26-0 game over the Panthers. This team, to me, is exactly what the numbers say. Average. NFL baseline. Not good, not bad. Just perfectly average.
And the frustrating thing is especially looked on the offensive side of the ball in 2022, and the numbers were much better for Trevor Lawrence. It felt different. The turnovers were down. And then in 2023, even when they were 8-3, and that's why I was kind of encouraged by the Jags, even when they were 8-3, because the offense was not good. We'll talk about exactly why, and I can break that down a little bit. But I think the Jags are in a really, really interesting spot as an organization, and they have Trevor Lawrence that leads them, and they just gave him a contract extension. And I feel like the Jags, and specifically Trevor Lawrence, fall victim routinely because the fact that he isn't this generational prospect, that he's somehow a failure. And I even had the expectation that Calvin Ridley was going to come in 2023 and have this alpha number one impact and take Lawrence to an MVP level. I put money on that before the season, thinking that could happen. And it just didn't. So what's the truth with Lawrence? I think he is a QB with flaws that still has major upside. And if he can improve on those mistakes, it can be special. But Bobby, there's a lot of things that Trevor Lawrence still needs to clean up. There's conversations around his surrounding cast and how much they did kind of hurt him last year with the drops. And the areas in which Lawrence does need to improve, I think those conversations are big conversations, and that shouldn't be something that you just glance over.
Yeah, and you look at them like they were awful in the red zone last year, a 50% touchdown rate, which was 22nd in the NFL, but they should have been a lot better than that. And look at the teams that are below them. They're all off. They're all quarterbacked by awful quarterbacks or bad quarterbacks. Let's talk about Trevor Lawrence in the passing game. I put him 10th in our QB rankings. I think there's so much good, right? Like, I think he processes really well. He wins from the pocket. He throws the ball just as good as anyone not named Mahomes or Josh Allen. I think he does a good job manipulating the pocket and avoiding pressure, getting the ball out to the right places in the right time. I think the big thing killing him, one, don't play through injury, because, when he did that, he just didn't look good. It sounds simple because every quarterback struggles with pressure, but I think when you look at the best quarterbacks in the NFL, or the ones that are looked at as like top 15, I think he's probably the one that's most affected by pressure, because he has these bad turnovers, right? And especially in key moments, like he was 7th highest in interception rate last year, seventh highest interception rate under pressure, and he was a second least pressured quarterback last year, right? The 7th highest turnover worthy play rate under pressure. I don't really love turnover worthy play stats, but use it for what it's worth. The guys that were higher than him were Nick Mullins, Mac Jones, Trevor Siemian, Easton Stick, Desmond Ridder, and Gardner Minshew. He shouldn't be in those spots. And when you watch it, when he's under pressure, he just kind of locks in and throws it. And there's the only time his arm gets him in trouble is because he'll have these overthrows, or just simply just bad decisions when he's under pressure, where he locks in on what's there and just throws it down the field, but still will throw it into harm's ways. And I just think that is the thing that's holding him back from being viewed as one of the elite quarterbacks.
Yeah, I agree. There's some pretty stuff there, man. And there were people that made a compilation video of all the drops that the Jacksonville Jaguars receivers had this year. So on the other side, that Trevor Lawrence needs to get better under pressure, and he especially needs to get better when he holds the ball over 3 seconds as well. while there's that side of it of Trevor Lawrence, there's also the other side of it where there was no QB that was impacted by drops more in 2023, and Trevor Lawrence was
and his drop rate
seventh.
was low, but it was
significant.
It was impactful plays, right?
Yes,
Like they were.
Where if you look at that compilation, they were a lot of them were touchdowns, Bobby. Where you have Calvin Ridley, and some of these are tough drops where it's like, damn, it's a tough ball to even haul in. But Trevor Lawrence just puts it in such a great spot where only the receiver could catch it. Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley. So really, none of these numbers. You look, it's like, well, the sack rate's like 5.8%. That's not glaringly bad.
No, it's really good.
Like you said, the drop, it's good. The drop rate isn't bad, but it's the fact that if you look at when he holds the ball for over 3 seconds, and this is, by the way, I want to clarify, I'm going to read off a lot of numbers. This is pre-week 9, and week 9 was the 49ers blowout. And it was around that time of the year, after that bye week, where Trevor Lawrence got hurt. So this isn't Trevor Lawrence, including the stats where he got hurt. This is all before, where they were 8-3. Under 3 seconds, EPA per attempt, he was 19th. Even that was much better in 2022. Over 3 seconds, he falls down to number 29. From a clean pocket, in 2023, number 16 in EPA per attempt, and then under pressure, it's down to number 31. And the sack and interception rate was number 27 when he's under pressure through week 9 in 2023. And then when he has a clean pocket in 2023, sack plus interception rate, best in the league. So really, that is the thing that has defined Trevor Lawrence. These turnovers that sometimes he throws. He also has 12 fumbles over the last 2 years in the NFL, which and I'm pretty sure that leads the NFL. Those 12 fumbles over the last 2 years.
And they've lost games because of those fumbles too. That being how here's my biggest question, and I wasn't a fan of the Calvin Ridley trade in the first place. And they let him walk, which is, crazier. I don't know why they didn't just lock up Josh Allen and franchise tag Calvin Ridley. And I think there's a lot of criticism of the way this team does business.
They have $28 million in cap space.
Even though I wasn't a fan of the Calvin Ridley trade, I don't think he's a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. He was their best weapon by, to me, a good margin last year. Had 1,000 yards. How do they replace Calvin Ridley? Is it all on Brian Thomas Jr.?
No, I actually, so here, my X factor is Christian Kirk. And dude, he was good in 2022, and Christian Kirk even was hurt last year. And his rate stuff like receptions per game and yards per game, I'm pretty sure it was similar to what he did in 2022. But he was good. And I think part of the reason why maybe they had the confidence, and maybe they would have done this anyway, but at least this is how I'm justifying it in my head, that Christian Kirk signing was ripped a little bit. Oh, you're overpaying for this guy. This guy isn't worth it. And 2022 looks pretty damn good, and that offense is pretty versatile. And one of the reasons why I think it's versatile, and I think an optimistic talking point for the Jacksonville Jaguars this year, is that Ridley was that alpha number 1. And he was good, and the numbers were good, but for whatever reason, it just didn't fully all mesh together. And now that you remove Ridley, it's kind of like everybody gets to eat a little bit more kind of factor. And I think the main beneficiary of that is hopefully going to be Christian Kirk, but he needs to stay healthy, number 1. And number 2, the production doesn't, like, somebody is going to need to lead the crew, and it is going to have to be him. So no, I am not putting this on Brian Thomas Jr., and I'm certainly not putting this on Gabe Davis.
Yeah, we'll talk about those two guys, because they can't put anything more on Evan Ingram's plate. Like they force feed him, right?
Well, they kind of could. They could.
I mean, he led the team in targets last year with 143.
They can't from a volume perspective, but what they can actually ask Evan Ingram to do, which is so crazy to see how he was used last year. His average depth of target was like 5 yards.
Oh, he was 42nd out of 45 tight ends in average depth of target.
I mean, what he would basically do getting out of his stance is he would be, and maybe, here's the theory. I don't watch Jacksonville Jaguars film like this, but a theory is that an answer, if Doug Peterson needs to give Trevor Lawrence answers, that's one of my big asks of Doug Peterson this year. If Trevor Lawrence is going to struggle with pressure this much, and if he has this mental clock where he struggles so much after 3 seconds, then maybe Evan Ingram was that answer for Trevor Lawrence of if nothing's open, man, Evan Ingram's going to be right in the middle of the field, shuffling his feet as like this check down option. You know how like the Kansas City Chiefs do that shit like in the red zone where Travis Kelce will just like
I think they should
find
flip
space?
it though, right? I think Christian Kirk should be that for them, right? Like Evan Ingram is someone
Okay.
you should be looking to. Again, he was 40th in target share for deep passes for tight ends last year,
I think he could do more than that.
right? Like he was like they basically ran 10 personnel last year because they don't use him to block at all, nor should they. He's a bad blocker, but he had the most tight end slot reps in the NFL. He only lined up in line a third of the time. And they, like I said, they force fed him on the short average of the target, putting him out in the flats and letting him get upfield, which that is valuable. But you have to try and use him as a mismatch down the field. I know he's not a perfect player, but like you have to use him like that. And like you said, like make Christian Kirk that outlet for Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, you're not going to every play where putting everything up the seam, but you need to involve more of that in there for
It was just weird. It was weird.
Because it looks great. His stats look great. He'll go to the Pro Bowl and it all sounds good. But like to be paying Evan Ingram that much, he needs to be a guy that creates explosives, right? If he gives you nothing as a blocker, nothing in line, and we'll talk about the run game and I think how that hurts them. Like he has to be creating some explosives for you. And when you're paying Christian Kirk, make him more of the outlet, short average, low average depth of target guy for you.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing about the Jacksonville Jaguars is that everybody's numbers look like Evan Ingram's numbers look fantastic. Even Calvin Ridley in some efficiency numbers had one of his best years as a pro, and that includes even the 1 year that he was really good in Atlanta. But it just didn't work, and that's why it's such a complicated conversation.
Well, I also think Trevor Lawrence elevates he is one of those guys who elevates guys above what they would on so and so's team.
I agree.
But let's talk about the outside guys. Brian Thomas Jr., their first round pick. They signed Gabe Davis. I don't know what they're going to get out of them, right? Like Gabe Davis had Josh Allen at his quarterback, and he had 8 games of less than 25 yards last year, 5 games of 0 yards, right? Like he's giving you less than 3 catches per game. Even 2022, which was his best season with 800 yards, he only averaged 3 catches per game, and he only had 1 game where he caught 6 passes, right? Like was kind of the big play, a big play threat for them, and they had some really big plays with him. That playoff game, obviously being the peak. I think Trevor Lawrence can get value out of Gabe Davis, but my question is, if that's what he was with Josh Allen, what is he going to be with Trevor Lawrence?
I think he's going to be exactly that, and I think that's fine because this offense has other options. They don't need Gabe Davis to be all reliable. Like they have, they have Evan Ingram that they're going to put out wide. They're going to have Christian Kirk. They're going to have Brian Thomas. They're even going to have, I think they included Travis Etienne more in the passing game last year. Obviously, you're asking your running backs and tight ends to do different things than your wide receiver, but Gabe Davis is going to be exactly who Gabe Davis is, and I think that's fine. Ideally in this offense, the number 3 target, who is a deep target that's going to give you 40 catches a year and maybe have a 55% catch rate because his average depth of target is very deep. That's what I think Gabe Davis is, and I think that's fine.
And that's where I think this team needs to, like, they were get the ball out quick, like, snap the ball, get it out quick type of thing. I think this needs to be a team that looks to create more explosives with the personnel that they have. We talk about Ingram, talk about Davis, and then Brian Thomas Jr., right? Like, he's going to take some growing in his game, right? I don't think he's so far away. Like, I think some of the stuff in his game is so fixable if he puts in the work and they really work with him at some of the stuff. But as is, he is someone who is probably just a 3 route type of guy. His rookie year, but he can create those explosives. Like I think that's where they need to try and lean into instead of being this super, efficient team where they sustain these long drives and get the ball out quick. Obviously, you're going to have elements of that, but I think there needs to be more effort with the personnel to create explosives.
But the only risk that you're going to run is if Trevor Lawrence has to hold on to the ball for longer. If you hold on to the ball for longer, then you're going to face pressure. So I think,
but at some point that's got to be on
job.
Lawrence, right? And they have the offensive line to protect, right? Like they upgraded at center with Mitch Morris. They need. Yeah. We'll talk about Anton Harrison. I'll just say he's going to be my X factor for them. But at some point, you got to put a bit of that on Trevor Lawrence. Do you want to talk about their run game?
Yeah, because honestly, I think that may be a big reason why. Like, if you're facing these third and longs and the early down efficiency was much better in 2022, and I think a huge part of that was the run game was better in 2022, and it took a huge step back in 2023. It was 30th in EPA per rushing attempt.
Yeah, and they were, second to last in yards per carry. Like they're simply an awful run team, and it's a shame because Travis Etienne's a good back, right?
Yeah.
He had the most missed tackles forced in the NFL, and they had the second least yards per carry.
What do you think changed, by the way? Like it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Maybe there was like a staff change, but it was like beautiful run design stuff in 2022. And Holes and ETN was just explosive, and he averaged it was 5 yards over 5 yards per attempt in 2022. What was it down to in 2023?
Theirs was like 3.6. I don't know,
Which is crazy. Which I think he was below 4. I think he was below 4.
Yeah. Well, and I also think like their personnel, like again, when I talk about like Evan Ingram playing, like they run 10 personnel. When you have Evan Ingram out in the slot, you're not in 11 personnel, you're in 10 personnel. So maybe there's some things where they could get a little, heavier. I know they drafted Brenton Strange in the second round, last year, but we'll see what happens with that. He didn't give them anything. I don't know the answer because the offensive line they're better pass blockers than run blockers, but they should be able to run the ball better, especially when ETN is breaking tackles like that. But they can't be that bad. That's like unacceptable for this team.
Yeah, it'll just help Lawrence out, and I think Lawrence. I'm not saying that Lawrence is a quarterback that needs help, but you've seen how the wide receivers impacted him last year, and it was by far, by the way. I keep emphasizing how he was the quarterback that was most impacted by drops. I think it was like minus 59 EPA total, like total, not EPA per play, total EPA. And I think the next two guys were like Purdy and Stafford, and they were like in the 20s, like the mid 20s. So it was a huge discrepancy. And like like we said, it was a lot of them were touchdowns and beautifully thrown balls that should have been touchdowns as well.
Do you want to talk about the defense?
Yeah, man. I have a lot of Lawrence stats, and my main thing for Lawrence, you talked about how maybe they can get more explosive, and man, they certainly have a personnel to do it with Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., and I think Christian Kirk is a guy that can kind of do it all. I think Peterson just needs to help give Trevor Lawrence answers and give him options. Because clearly, if Doug Peterson is looking at Trevor Lawrence and Trevor Lawrence is not this perfect generational maybe if he's not this perfect generational quarterback prospect, the best quarterback that we've seen since Andrew Luck, right? Then I think Peterson needs to recognize the areas in which he can help his quarterback out the most and try and give him those answers. That's my big ask for Peterson this year.
Yeah. So defensively, they collapsed at the end of last year, right? They had that shutout game versus the Panthers, but they gave up 29.2 points per game in those last 5 losses that they have. They made the correct decision to fire Mike Caldwell, and I'm excited to see Ryan Nielsen come in from the Falcons. Ryan Nielsen's defense was ranked 18th last year, a team that had no pass rush to it at all, right? And not because Ryan Nielsen, but because of the personnel. But they were still top 10 in pressure rate, right? Like think about how bad that we're doing a Falcons preview tomorrow, and it's like that pass rush group is so bad. But he was able, was top 10 in passing, number 1 in run defense EPA. I think they have enough talent to be a successful defense, right? Like this unit is obviously led by Josh Allen, who just got paid, right? 17.5 sacks and 17 tackles for a loss in 2023. 5th in total sacks, hits, and pressures, 7th in pass rush win rate. Like he had his best year last year, when in previous seasons he had modest box score numbers, but the film showed an excellent player, right? But I actually even think on top of that, like he actually did take steps in 2023. So it starts with him. And I really like the Eric Armstead signing, right? I think he's still like a top 10 to 12 defensive tackle in the NFL. He may put up some of the box score stats, but he's a really good two-way player, and I think he's going to add a lot to this defense.
Yeah, I've been doing this thing recently on these TPPs where I lie and I I write down an initial X factor and then I actually mean somebody else. So Christian Kirk, offensive X factor, but my real X factor is Eric Armstead. And I forgot that I wrote him down because we're doing a lot of these in prep and we do a lot of them in bulk. So you forget what you write down. I think Eric Armstead, he has the potential, and I think he already is. But the fact is that he hasn't been healthy as well. He has the potential to be one of the best pass rushing interior defensive linemen in the league. And in only 12 games last year, he was 12th in pressures among interior defensive linemen and more than a respectable 15% pass rush win rate as well. Dude, he's massive. He's 6'7", 290 pounds. He wears the C on his shirt out there in San Francisco, and that's saying a lot because they have a lot of good talented players over there that have been there for a long time. So Armstead leaves San Fran, and I'm not concerned about what he could look like, leaving, the surroundings of such a good defense and, playing next to Nick Bosa for all these years because, like, Josh Hines Allen, which, by the way, changed his name, Josh Hines Allen and, Walker, I know he's a little overrated, but I think having that trio of guys is really good. And if Armstead can continue to be healthy, that is a pretty fearsome unit that does put up a ton of production. You're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Trayvon Walker had a fraud 10-sack season last year.
Yeah, it wasn't.
His win rate was 47.
It wasn't the most fraudulent I've seen. Like but out of like 50 guys that qualify in for pass rushing metrics on PFF, he ranged in like the 40s for a lot.
He was 47th out of 57 in pass rush win rate, which is crazy, right? Because he didn't have the stats of Georgia, and people are like, "Don't pay attention to the stats because Georgia doesn't ask him to do so." It's like, okay, but watch the film. Like, I've seen other Georgia players in that same role and do more.
What does he do well?
Do more than him. And you would think there'd be this big victory lap because he had 10 sacks, but I think most people who watch him are like, yeah, but I wish they would bump him inside a little more. And maybe they will, right? Maybe Ryan Nielsen will, right? Like, Nielsen's also Nielsen's done good. Like, his bread and butter was as a D-line coach and with some like bigger D linemen too, right? So like, I'm excited to see if Nielsen can get that year 3 bump out of, because we know he's talented as hell, right? That was right why he was picked first overall. So I'm excited, not excited, but I think if there's anyone that can get the most out of him, it is Ryan Nielsen. And then with the linebackers,
I love the duo.
Is Foyesade Aluakon the most? Is he underrated or people know about him?
No, he's underrated.
Because he's like one of the better all-around linebackers in the NFL. Like, he's led the NFL in tackles a couple of times. He gives you pass rush and coverage production. Like,
plays like a nut.
Yeah, and I think he's really helped with Devin Lloyd's progression, who played really well last year and was another do-it-all linebacker who me and you love.
He had a rookie year that was kind of struggled a little bit.
Yeah, and he really kind of thrived in year 2. A guy we really liked out of Utah. Like, viewed him as a top 15 player. Like, they're right up there with the linebacker duos in the NFL, right? Like, I think we did it our rankings, and I have the 49ers, the Falcons, and the Saints up there, but like they're right up there.
Chris Rose and I had him in our top 6. So
yeah, and after doing this exercise, like, I would probably have to go revisit and put them in there. Like, that's a really good group. And here's the biggest the question mark for this defense is the secondary.
Yeah.
I love Tyson Campbell. He struggled last year, right? Gave up 45 yards per game, and the year before he was like only 27. Like, he's not a total shutdown cornerback who keeps you out of the end zone, but like he is and should be really good. Like, he's so talented. Like, he's got to hit his potential because he's too talented to be a guy who gives up, the touchdowns and the big plays that he does. Like, he has the talent to be a guy who allows 30 or less yards per game, and he did that in 2022. But the rest of the secondary outside of Andre Cisco really worries me. Like, they lost Darius Williams, they replaced him with Ronald Darby. Like, I love Andre Cisco, right? I think Nielsen again is going to make him thrive, right? He had 7 interceptions the last 2 years, and and was a guy who got his hands on the ball a lot at Syracuse. And you see what Nielsen, did with Jesse Bates. But outside of those two guys, and even Tyson Campbell can be suspect this time, but I think it's a secondary that can be exposed.
Yeah, so it was the tale of two seasons for the Jacksonville Jaguars, where their weeks 1 through 8 last year, they were 4th in EPA per play. They were forcing a lot of turnovers, man. Their offense was turning the ball over a lot, but they were forcing a ton of turnovers. And then weeks 10 to 18, they didn't force as many turnovers. Their offense continued to turn over the ball, and they were 24th in EPA per play. So I don't fully believe in the secondary, and I'm also not buying into Eric Armstead staying healthy. So that's why I'm a little bit more down on this defense. I think they're going to stop the run. I think they're going to stop the run really well. That's what the Falcons did last year under the DC. So
I think they'll
they're going to
be
stop
minimal, unless they have like crazy injuries. I think they'll be middle of the pack at least.
Yeah. So I and I think that's where they wound up ending up in total EPA per play is 13th, and that's a little bit above average. So but I'm with you. I'm worried about the secondary. Flat out, because I think the losses, maybe we can transition to additions and losses. I think Darius Williams is a huge loss.
It is.
They also lost Trey Herndon, who was a guy that played slot corner for them a good amount. But Darius Williams, I think he's one of the I think he's one of the guys that makes plays on the football, despite him really being really small. He makes plays on the football at one of the highest rates out of any cornerbacks in the NFL.
Yeah. So let's do the additions and losses in free agency. They added Mac Jones, Gabe Davis, Mitch Morse, Eric Armstead, Ronald Darby, Darnell Savage. They lost C.J. Beathard, Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, Fularonzo Fatukasi. I think I got that right. Darius Williams, Trey Herndon, and then Rayshawn Jenkins. We didn't talk about losing him in the secondary. Better or worse?
Dude, that's my main thing with this team, where I could see a path where they're good-ish, but I don't see an area where the Jaguars greatly improved over what went wrong last year. Like, great, Eric Armstead's a great ad, great, but make a strength a strength. I'm never gonna knock that, right? But with the departure of Darius Williams and then even Calvin Ridley, if they don't force turnovers at the same rate that they did early in 2023, I'm really worried about that secondary. And point to me the area in which they've helped Trevor Lawrence get better offensively, rather than just putting it on Trevor Lawrence to improve himself. They didn't really help him that much.
I mean, they improved their weak link on the O-line, which was Luke Fortner, and brought in Mitch Morse. But
okay.
But at the end of the day, would you rather have Luke Fortner and Calvin Ridley or Mitch Morse and Gabe Davis? You're going to take.
And I like Brian Thomas, by the way. I love Brian Thomas. I thought he should have went earlier. But
let's talk about their draft class, because
year,
we like Brian Thomas, who they picked in the first round. The second round, pick 48, by the way, they went Mason Smith. Third round, they went Jarrian Jones, the corner out of FSU. Fourth round, Javon Foster, an offensive tackle. Another LSU D lineman in the fourth round, Jordan Jefferson. DeAndre Prince in the fifth round. Keelan Robinson in the sixth round. A kicker in the sixth, Cam Little. And then the seventh round, Miles Cole. I kind of hate this draft class outside of Brian Thomas.
Yeah, Mason Smith was this year's Gervon Dexter, who I actually really like Gervon Dexter in Chicago. But
it was the Jags pick, because it's like, super long, big,
athletic
defensive lineman. Let's just take him
from the South.
Yeah, like it was about as Jags
south
pick as it gets. But we like the Brian Thomas pick. But again, Jarrian Jones is like the key from this class. Like, if he could come in and start at corner right away, that could be the difference maker. I don't think Javon Foster is ever going to be a good offensive lineman. Jordan Jefferson is a rotational D lineman at most.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the guys, meh.
When you're saying that about a corner in year one, that's a dangerous game to play.
Late third round. But I also think Jarrian Jones is capable of doing. He had some he looked good against Malik Neighbors at times. So he is someone that could do that, and especially if they put him in the nickel and give him not the outside corner responsibilities. But it's a class I don't like. Who is your X factor?
My X factor is Eric Armstead. I lied and said Christian Kirk on offense, so it is Eric Armstead. I think if he's healthy and if he's rolling, getting pressure, that's a even if Trayvon Walker is a little overrated, but if if we're still pushing double digit sacks and Eric Armstead can be one of the best interior defensive linemen pass rush rise, and Josh Hines Allen is entering the top 5 pass rusher conversation in the entire league, that's a unit that could transform this defense and help out a secondary.
Mine is Anton Harrison, their first round pick, offensive tackle from 2023. I mean, they need him to develop and be good. Like, again, we talk about the pressure stuff, creating big plays. He's a big part of that. And Trevor Lawrence struggles with front side pressure, right? A lot of times when they were bad on third down last year, it was from their right tackle getting beat. So, like, you need Anton Harrison to take that step up. I know taking second year first round pick is a little cheap, but I do think it is the X factor for them. Over under 8.5 wins.
I want to remind myself what I had the Titans. I went over. They were 5.5. I went over on the Indianapolis Colts. So that means, Bobby, I'm going under for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Me too. I think they're going to go 8-9. Division is stronger, and they have a pretty tough schedule.
Yeah.
Like,
unfortunately.
I thought I put this in my notes, but let me pull it up. The start of the season could be kind of rough.
I think the first 10 weeks are rough.
They have the Dolphins, the Browns. They have the Dolphins, the Browns, the Bills, the Texans, and the Colts the first 5 weeks. Then the Bears. Then the Patriots. Then then the Eagles. Like, it's just it's a really tough schedule for a team that finished a third place schedule. It's just a very tough schedule. So I have them going under at 8-9.
Yeah, and last year was a year where, geez, man, I know the Texans took everybody by surprise, but you had a declining Ryan Tannehill, which they were waiting for Will Levis to take that job over, rookie quarterback. C.J. Stroud, rookie quarterback, and Anthony Richardson, rookie quarterback, and they couldn't win the division.
No,
they finished.
It was
third.
Supposed to be the easiest division win last year, and they choked it away. So I'm going under. All right, that is the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this is Football Today.